Emma Parker once believed love could fix everything. When she married Daniel 9 years ago, she thought their hearts spoke the same language: laughter, promises, and small acts of care. They were the kind of couple who stayed up late talking about dreams and future plans, who believed nothing could shake what they had built. But time has a way of softening the brightest colors, and their marriage, once warm and full of light, had faded into quiet shades of grey dot by the time autumn arrived that year. Their home in the suburbs of Seattle felt more like a waiting room than a family house. Everything looked fine from the outside: a clean kitchen, fresh flowers by the window, a child's laughter echoing in the hallway. But beneath that calm, something had gone missing. The connection that once made ordinary days feel special had turned into a careful routine. Emma worked part-time at a local art store, spending most afternoons with their 8-year-old son, Noah. She loved him more than anything in the world. He was bright, curious, and kind, her reason for getting up every morning. Daniel, on the other hand, had become a shadow of the man she married. He worked long hours as an architect, coming home after dinner, distracted and tired. His phone was always buzzing. Even when he was there, he wasn't really there. They weren't fighting, not exactly. It was quieter than that. The kind of silence that feels heavier than shouting. The kind that grows slowly, without anyone noticing, until one day you realize you don't know how to fill it anymore. That Friday evening, Emma stood at the kitchen counter, stirring a pot of soup. The rain tapped gently against the window. The house smelled of thyme and garlic, cozy, familiar scents. But she felt none of it. Daniel was late again. Noah sat at the table, drawing spaceships on a piece of paper, humming softly. Emma glanced at the clock. 8:47 p.m. When the door finally opened, Daniel stepped in, shaking rain off his coat. His tie hung loose and his eyes looked tired. "Long day?" Emma asked softly. He nodded. "Yeah. Sorry, traffic was awful." She smiled politely and placed a bowl in front of him. It was the same exchange they had every night, gentle, safe, emotionless. Noah looked between them, sensing something adults often tried to hide. He finished his soup quickly and ran upstairs, leaving the two of them alone. Emma wanted to say something. Anything. But what could she say that hadn't already been said in her head 100 times? "You've changed. We've changed. I miss us." Instead, she picked up the dishes and quietly began washing them. Daniel scrolled through his phone, lost in emails. The sound of water and the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the room. That was their new kind of conversation. Later, when she climbed into bed, Daniel was still downstairs working. The glow of his laptop leaked through the stairwell. Emma turned off the light and lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The silence pressed against her chest. She thought about the early years, the way he used to surprise her with coffee in bed, how they used to laugh about nothing. She missed being seen, missed being known. At some point, she heard his footsteps and the creak of the couch. He wasn't coming to bed again. That hurt more than she wanted to admit. She turned to her side, clutching the blanket close. Downstairs, Daniel sat in the dark living room. He wasn't working anymore. The laptop was closed, and he was just staring at nothing. He felt the same emptiness Emma did, but didn't know how to say it. Every time he tried to start a conversation, the words felt too heavy. He told himself he was too tired, that it wasn't the right moment. Deep down, though, he feared she no longer needed him the way she once did. In another room, Noah woke up to the faint sound of his mother crying. He didn't move. He just listened, holding his stuffed bear tight. It wasn't the first time he'd heard it. Those quiet sobs that stopped the moment footsteps came close. He didn't understand everything, but he understood sadness. The next morning came with sunlight cutting through half-open blinds. Emma made breakfast: toast, eggs, orange juice. Daniel came down dressed for work, still buttoning his shirt. They exchanged polite words about Noah's school project, the grocery list, the weather. The tone was friendly, distant, and perfectly practiced. Noah noticed the way his parents spoke like neighbors instead of family. He tried to make them laugh, told them about his teacher's silly jokes, but the smiles didn't last long. He felt small, as if his laughter was bouncing off invisible walls. When Daniel left, Emma stood by the window watching his car pull out of the driveway. The morning light glimmered on the wet pavement. Everything looked calm, normal, even beautiful. But her heart ached with a quiet grief she didn't know how to name. She wasn't angry anymore. She was just tired of pretending everything was fine. That evening, while helping Noah with his homework, she caught herself staring at a family photo on the wall. It was from a summer trip to Oregon. They were standing on a beach, wind in their hair, eyes bright with sunlight. It felt like a lifetime ago. She traced her fingers over the frame and whispered, "Where did we go?" The clock ticked softly. The room dimmed as night crept in, and rain began to fall again. Emma tucked Noah into bed, kissed his forehead, and turned off the light. But as she closed the door, she caught a glimpse of him still awake, staring at her. There was something in his eyes, worry, confusion, maybe fear, and it broke her heart. She went downstairs, poured herself a cup of tea, and sat at the kitchen table. The steam curled upward, disappearing into the air. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that made her feel an invisible dot in that stillness. She realized something she hadn't wanted to admit. The life she was living, the one she thought she had built with love, had slowly drifted into something else. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't alive either. She was stuck between holding on and letting go, between memories and reality. That night, she whispered to herself, something has to change, that she didn't know that change was already coming, and that it would arrive in the smallest, most unexpected way. Because upstairs, in the soft glow of his nightlight, Noah lay awake, replaying his mother's tears in his head. He didn't understand grown-up problems, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't watch her be sad anymore. And when he spoke the next night, his little voice, full of truth and love, would shake the walls of silence that had trapped them for years. That moment was still a few hours away, but the night already carried its promise. The wind whispered through the rain, and somewhere in that sound, life was preparing to turn quietly, but forever. The night was quiet, except for the sound of rain brushing against the window. Emma sat on the couch, her tea untouched, her thoughts heavy. Daniel had fallen asleep on the sofa again, his laptop still open beside him. The soft blue glow lit up the room, making everything look colder. Emma stared at him for a long moment. She didn't feel anger anymore, just a quiet sadness that refused to fade. It was almost midnight when she decided to check on Noah. She pushed open his door gently, expecting to find him asleep, but his lamp was still on. He sat up in bed, hugging his stuffed bear tightly. His little face looked serious, older than his years. "Sweetheart, why aren't you sleeping?" she asked softly. He looked up, hesitant at first. "Mum," he whispered, "are you and Dad going to live in different houses?" The question hit her like a wave. Her hand froze on the doorknob. "What? What makes you think that, honey?" she asked, forcing a small smile. I hear things," Noah said. "You cry sometimes. Dad sleeps on the couch a lot. And you don't laugh together anymore." Emma's heart ached. She sat on the edge of his bed and brushed his hair from his forehead. "Grown-ups sometimes get sad, but that doesn't mean we stop loving you," she said carefully. Noah looked down, clutching his bear tighter. "I know," he said. "But you don't look happy, Mom. And when you're sad, it makes me feel sad too." His words were small, but they carried the weight of truth. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She tried to smile, but it trembled. "You shouldn't worry about that, sweetheart. It's not your job to make us happy." He shook his head slowly. "But I just want you to smile again. Like before. Even if it means you and Dad don't live together." Her breath caught. The innocence of his voice tore right through her. He wasn't angry or scared, just honest. His words were pure, filled with love and confusion. It was the kind of honesty adults lose when they learn how to hide pain, though Emma couldn't speak for a moment. She took his small hands in hers and whispered, "Thank you for telling me how you feel." "You're very brave, Noah." He nodded sleepily. "I just want you to be okay." She kissed his forehead, turned off the light, and stood in the hallway for a long time after closing his door. The sound of the rain outside felt louder now, like it was echoing her thoughts in that moment. She realized how much their silence had affected him. She had been so busy holding everything together, pretending to be fine, that she hadn't seen how deeply the distance between her and Daniel had seeped into their son's heart. When she finally went back downstairs, Daniel stirred on the couch. He looked up grudgingly. "Hey, you're still awake?" he asked. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I was just checking on Noah." He nodded, rubbing his eyes. "He's okay." Emma hesitated, then said, "He asked if we're getting divorced." "What?" Daniel sat up straight, guilt flashing across his face. "He asked you that." She nodded, her voice low but firm. "He hears more than we think, Daniel. He knows we're not happy." Daniel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He looked exhausted, but this time it wasn't just from work. "I didn't realize it had gotten that bad," he murmured. "It has," she said softly. "And the worst part is that our silence is hurting him more than it's hurting us." Daniel stared at the floor. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rain and the soft ticking of the clock. Finally, he said, "I don't know how we got here, Emma. I didn't mean for it to happen. I thought if I just worked harder, maybe we'd be okay." She looked at him, not angry, not blaming, just tired. "We stopped talking, Daniel. We stopped seeing each other. We've both been surviving, not living." Daniel's eyes softened. He reached out, but she didn't take his hand. "Not yet," she whispered. "Noah said something tonight that I can't forget. He said he just wants me to be happy, even if it means not being with you." That sentence hung in the air like smoke. Daniel's shoulders sank. "He said that?" "Yes," she said quietly. "And it broke me, Daniel. Because he shouldn't have to think like that. He's a child, but he can feel everything we try to hide." Daniel leaned back, rubbing his face with his hands. "I thought keeping things quiet would protect him." "It didn't," Emma replied gently. "It just made him carry it alone." The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the windows like a heartbeat. Emma walked to the window, staring into the darkness. Her reflection looked pale and tired, but behind her, she saw Daniel watching her. The man she once loved more than anything. For the first time in months, he looked as lost as she felt. She whispered without turning around, "We can't keep living like this. It's not fair to him. It's not fair to us." Daniel stood and walked toward her. "Do you want to fix this?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. The question was simple, but the weight behind it wasn't. She turned slowly, meeting his eyes. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted. "Maybe we start with honesty," he said. "No more pretending." Her eyes softened. "Then tomorrow we talk." "Really talk?" He nodded. Tomorrow. She nodded back, and though no promises were made, something in that exchange felt real, fragile, but real. Later that night, Emma went back to check on Noah. He was asleep this time, his bear tucked under his arm. She knelt beside his bed and whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart. You reminded me what matters." She kissed his forehead again and walked out quietly. Downstairs, she turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow of the living room lamp. The house still felt heavy, but it wasn't hopeless anymore. For the first time in a long while, there was something else mixed into the silence. A sense that maybe, just maybe, things could change. As she stood by the window watching the rain fade into mist, she realized how one small voice, a child's voice, had done what she and Daniel had failed to do for years. Speak the truth. That night, Emma didn't cry. She just sat there, feeling the weight in her chest slowly shift. It wasn't gone, but it was lighter, because now, she wasn't pretending anymore. She had heard her son, truly heard him. And once truth is spoken, it can't be ignored. Upstairs, Noah stirred in his sleep and smiled faintly, as if he knew his words had reached her heart. The house was still quiet, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt like the calm before something new, something that might heal what had been broken. And for the first time in years, the night didn't feel lonely. It felt like the beginning of change. The morning after Noah's words, the air in the Parker house felt different. The rain had stopped, and sunlight streamed through the windows, bouncing off the kitchen tiles. Emma stood by the counter, pouring coffee, her mind still replaying the conversation with her son. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Noah's small, serious face and heard his quiet voice asking, "Are you and Dad going to live in different houses?" She knew she couldn't ignore it anymore. Pretending everything was fine wasn't protecting anyone. It was breaking all of them, piece by piece. When Daniel came downstairs, still buttoning his shirt, she looked at him differently this time, not with distance or resentment, but with a quiet decision. "Daniel," she said softly, "we need to talk." He paused mid-step, surprised. "Now?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Now." They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same spot where they had shared hundreds of silent breakfasts. But this time, Emma wasn't going to let the silence win. She took a deep breath and began, "Noah asked me something last night. He wanted to know if we're going to live in different houses." Daniel's face went pale. "He said that?" She nodded. "He's been noticing everything. The distance, the way we don't talk. He's scared, Daniel. And honestly, I don't blame him." Daniel leaned back, running his hands through his hair. "God, I didn't realize it had gotten this bad," he said quietly. Emma's voice softened. "Neither did I, but hearing it from him made me realize we can't keep pretending. We've built walls instead of bridges, and he's caught in between them." For a moment, Daniel didn't respond. He just stared at the table, his jaw tight, his eyes tired. Then he whispered, "I know I've been distant. I just thought if I worked more, if I kept myself busy, maybe things would get better on their own." "They didn't," Emma said gently. "They got worse." Her words weren't cruel. They were honest. That honesty filled the space between them like fresh air after a storm. Daniel sighed deeply. "I guess I stopped trying to fix things because I thought you'd already given up on me." Emma's chest tightened. "I didn't give up, Daniel. I just stopped believing you cared enough to try." Those words hung between them, raw and painful, but necessary. They both knew they couldn't move forward without facing the truth. Daniel looked up, his voice low. "I still care, Emma. I always have. I just didn't know how to reach you anymore." She felt her eyes sting, but she didn't look away. Then reach me now. No excuses, no waiting for the perfect moment. Just talk to me. And so they did. For the first time in years, they talked not about bills, schedules, or Noah's homework, but about them. About what they missed, what went wrong, what still hurt. Daniel admitted he felt like he was constantly failing, at work, at home, as a husband. He said every time he saw Emma unhappy, he felt smaller, so he buried himself in his job, convincing himself he was doing it for the family. Emma confessed that she felt invisible, like her voice didn't matter anymore. She missed the small gestures, the laughter, the sense that they were a team. She said she had been lonely for so long that she forgot what it felt like to be understood. As they spoke, the bitterness that had built up slowly began to melt away. Neither of them cried loudly, but their words trembled with emotion. There was pain in their voices, yes, but also something else. Hope. When Noah came downstairs in his pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes, he stopped in the doorway, watching them. His parents were sitting close, talking softly, their hands resting on the table, almost touching. Everything okay? He asked, his voice uncertain. Emma smiled gently. We're just talking, sweetheart. Everything's okay. Noah nodded, though he looked curious. It had been a long time since he'd seen them talk like that. Not coldly, not carefully, but really talk. He poured himself cereal and sat at the counter, listening quietly. After breakfast, Daniel offered to drive Noah to school. When they left, Emma stood by the window, watching their car disappear down the street. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel that hollow ache when the door closed. She felt something lighter, something like possibility. That afternoon, when Daniel returned home, he didn't go straight to his laptop. Instead, he helped Emma prepare dinner. It was a small gesture, but it mattered. They cooked together in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing small smiles. At the table that evening, Noah chatted about his day at school, a science project, a funny story about his teacher, and both his parents listened. Not pretending, not distracted, but truly there. After Noah went to bed, Daniel and Emma sat in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp making the space feel warm again. I don't know where we go from here, Emma said softly. Maybe we don't need to know yet, Daniel replied. Maybe we just start with being honest. Every day. She nodded. And maybe we start remembering why we fell in love in the first place. He smiled faintly. You mean the coffee shop on 5th Street? Her eyes softened. You spilled hot chocolate all over me. He chuckled quietly. And you still agreed to go out with me. Emma laughed. A real, gentle laugh that Daniel hadn't heard in months. The sound filled the room, wrapping around them like a warm blanket. When the laughter faded, he reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as if they'd never forgotten how to fit together. It wasn't a perfect fix. The hurt was still there, the past still heavy. But for the first time in years, they were both choosing to face it. Together. As the night deepened, they sat side by side, talking about everything and nothing. About Noah, about work, about the little dreams they once had. The walls that had divided them were finally beginning to crack, letting light in. Before heading to bed, Emma whispered, I'm not sure what tomorrow looks like, but tonight feels better. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. Then let's build from that. Upstairs, Noah stirred in his sleep. Maybe it was the quiet sound of laughter drifting through the house. Or maybe it was just the peace that had finally settled between his parents. Whatever it was, he smiled in his sleep, his small heart sensing that something had shifted. Downstairs, Emma leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. But this time, The silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't full of regret. It was calm, peaceful, the kind that comes after a long storm when the world feels new again. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, Emma knew one thing for certain. When her son spoke that night, he hadn't just changed her life. He had saved it. The weeks after that long talk brought quiet but steady change. Nothing happened overnight, but there was movement. Small, genuine steps towards something better. Emma noticed the difference first in the mornings. Daniel started coming down early, pouring coffee for both of them like he used to. They didn't always talk much, but the silence no longer felt like distance. It felt like peace. Noah sensed it too. The tense air that once filled the house had softened. His parents laughed sometimes now. Little moments, but real. One evening, when he was drawing at the table, Daniel leaned over and helped him design a paper rocket. Emma watched them from the kitchen, smiling quietly to herself. It was simple, but it meant everything. Emma had started painting again. For years, her brushes had gathered dust in a corner, waiting for her to feel like herself again. Now, each evening after dinner, she sat near the window, letting colors pour out of her heart. Soft blues, hopeful yellows, gentle strokes of light that reflected the calm she was slowly finding inside. Sometimes Daniel joined her, sketching rough outlines beside her, their quiet companionship speaking louder than words. One Friday night, as the rain tapped softly against the windows again, they decided to have dinner together, not out of routine, but out of choice. The table was set with candles, a simple meal, and the warmth of effort. Noah sat between them, grinning as he talked about a school trip coming up. Emma and Daniel listened closely, exchanging glances that held more than politeness now. There was care again, a faint spark of love rediscovering its place. After dinner, when Noah went to bed, Emma stood by the sink washing dishes. Daniel walked up behind her quietly and said, "You know, I missed this, all of it." She turned, meeting his eyes. "Me too," she said softly. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you think we can really start over?" Emma looked down for a moment, then back at him. "Maybe we don't start over. Maybe we just start again, from where we are now." That answer was enough. They didn't need grand promises or dramatic gestures. What they needed was exactly this: honesty, presence, effort. Over the next few days, they found rhythm in small routines. Daniel made time to come home early at least twice a week. Emma invited him to her art store one afternoon, showing him the new collection she'd been helping with. He watched her light up as she talked, realizing how much he'd missed seeing her passionate about something. That night, while tucking Noah into bed, Emma brushed his hair aside and kissed his forehead. "How was your day, sweetheart?" He smiled sleepily. "Good. You and Dad were laughing again." Her heart warmed. "Did you like that?" He nodded. "Yeah. It makes the house sound happy." Emma's eyes filled with quiet tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude. "Thank you, Noah," she whispered. "You helped us remember how to be happy." Noah yawned, eyes already closing. "I didn't do anything," he mumbled. "You did everything," she said softly. Watching him drift to sleep. Later that night, Emma stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool, the stars faint behind thin clouds. Daniel joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. They stood side by side, wrapped in quiet peace. "You know," she said after a moment, "when Noah spoke that night, I thought it was the beginning of the end. I thought his words would finally push us apart." Daniel nodded slowly. "And instead, they brought us back." She smiled. "Sometimes it takes a child's honesty to remind us of what we forgot. That love isn't about never breaking. It's about finding your way back after you do." Daniel looked at her, his eyes softer than she'd seen in years. "I'm sorry I let us drift so far," he said quietly. Emma reached for his hand. "I'm sorry I stopped believing we could find our way back." Their hands intertwined naturally, fingers fitting like puzzle pieces that had been waiting for years to connect again. The silence around them wasn't heavy anymore. It was calm, filled with understanding. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were still moments of disagreement, days when old habits tried to return. But now, instead of retreating into silence, they talked. They listened. They learned to meet halfway. Emma's paintings began to sell at the local art store. Daniel started a small project designing community centers, something he had dreamed about years ago, but never had time for. They began to celebrate each other's small victories, cheering each other on like teammates again. One evening, as they walked with Noah in the park, Emma looked around at families laughing, couples strolling hand in hand. The leaves were turning golden, the air crisp and gentle. Noah ran ahead, chasing a squirrel, his laughter echoing through the trees. Daniel glanced at Emma and smiled. "He's happy again," he said softly. She nodded. "We all are." They stopped by the pond, watching ripples move across the water. Daniel slipped his arm around her shoulders, and for the first time in years, she leaned into him without hesitation. It wasn't the same as before. It was better. It was real. Later that night, when they returned home, Emma found Noah already asleep. On his bedside table lay a small note written in his uneven handwriting. "I love you, Mom. I love you, Dad. Thank you for being happy again." Emma felt her throat tighten. She showed it to Daniel, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The note said everything. She placed it carefully in a small wooden box, a box where she used to keep love letters from their early days. It felt right to add this one there, the letter that had marked the rebirth of their family. Later, as she and Daniel sat together on the couch, she looked at him and said, "Do you ever think about how different life might have been if Noah hadn't spoken that night?" He smiled. "All the time. It's strange, isn't it? How a few words can change everything." Emma nodded, her voice soft. "He reminded us of who we were." They sat there quietly, hands joined, the house filled with the soft rhythm of peace. The walls that once echoed with silence now carried warmth again. Laughter, conversations, music, and love. As the night grew deeper, Emma looked around their living room, the same room that had once felt like a stranger's house, and whispered, "We found our way back." Daniel squeezed her hand. Together. Outside, the world was calm. The rain had stopped, and the sky had cleared, stars blinking softly above the quiet street. Inside, their hearts were finally at rest. That night, Emma realized something she would never forget. Life doesn't always give you second chances in loud, dramatic ways. Sometimes it comes softly, through the voice of a child, in a quiet house on a rainy night. And when you listen, really listen, everything can change. Her life had taken a different turn, not toward what she once imagined, but toward something even more precious: forgiveness, truth, and the kind of love that endures.